Okay. Now we're going to create our front and back pieces from our draft. So to do this, we're going to trace. We're going to go to Create, Piece, Trace. Now trace works in a way in which you trace your perimeter lines in clockwise order. Doesn't matter where you start. So I'm going to start at the waist, and I'm going to choose my waistline, my center front line, my sweep line. I'm going to choose this A-line angled line that I drew, and then I'm going to choose my hip curve line. Okay, so the program will trace each line until it intersects another line that you've selected. And don't worry that this isn't filled in. The program will automatically fill that in for you. So once you have all your perimeter lines selected, you right click OK. Then it's asking you if you want to select an internal line or internal points. I want to keep my hip line with me, so I'm going to choose this hip measure line, and I'm going to right click OK. And you see now I have a front pattern piece, and I'm going to click to drop it. It's then going to ask me to name my piece. I want to go ahead and do this so I don't have to resave it later. So following our naming convention, this will be my first piece. It's 01, FRT for front. I'm going to cut this once because it's going to be mirrored. So 01, and I'm going to cut it in self fabric. All right. I'm going to say OK. All right, so this is my front piece. Before I create my back piece, I'm going to shape my waist and I'm going to shape my hemline. So to do this, we're going to offset uneven both, but I'm going to add some points. So if I just offset uneven a straight line, I'm just going to have an angled waistline and an angled sweep line, and I want a nice curved line. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add points. So I'm just going to add about 3 points along this line, and I'm going to add about 3, maybe 4 points along this line as well. Okay, right click OK. To view these points, I'm going to go to View, Intermediate. Okay, so now you see my line, my points here and my points here. You see when we created our hip curve, the intermediate points were automatically added to create that shape that we built. So we're going to essentially do the same thing, but a little more manually. So I'm going to go to Create, Offset Uneven. I want to offset my center front waistline 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to click and drag into that line, and I'm going to do -0.25. With offsets, you are trying to, when you do negatives, you're going inside the piece. When you do positive, you're going outside of the piece. Okay? I want to make sure I have Replace on. If you don't have Replace on, just remember you have to swap your lines afterwards. I'm going to say OK. So you see when I first do that, the whole line moves 1/4 of an inch down. But I want it to blend to 0 at the side seam. So I'm going to click and drag into the side seam, and I'm going to choose 0. Okay. So now I have a completely straight line, and I can either use these points afterwards to shape my line, or I can use them during this process to help me as well. So I'm going to choose this intermediate point and say -1/4. So now I have I'm going to have a nice 90-degree angle here. Now this looks a little bit too angled, so I'm going to choose this and maybe try a 3/16 of an inch. That looks nice to me. And I think I'm okay with that. So I'm going to right click OK, and it replaced my original perimeter line with my new curved line. Now, if you get to this curved line and you still are not crazy about how it looks, you can go to Modify, Point Actions, Single Point, and you can click and drag into any of these points and move them. Again, I suggest turning Snap to Geometry off and just using your eye to manually place these points until you get a shape that you like. Okay, I'm going to right click OK to get out of that function. I'm going to do the exact same thing on my hemline. So I want to raise my side seam 1/4 of an inch to have a nice curved hemline. So I'm going to go to Create, Offset uneven. I'm going to click and drag into this point that I want to go minus 0.25. And I'm going to click and drag into my center front line that I want to be 0. Okay. Once again, I have a completely straight line. I'm going to choose this point and do 0. And I'm going to choose this point and try 1/4 of an inch. I don't think I like that, so I'm going to do maybe 3/16. That looks a little bit better. Okay, I'm going to right click OK. And once again, I can go to Modify, Single Point, and I can move these points a little bit here and there to get the shape that I want. Okay. All right. When you're done, right click OK to get out of the function. So now I have a nice front skirt with my waist curve and my sweep curve as well. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this piece to create my back. So I'm going to go to Create, Piece, Copy. I'm going to click the piece, and I'm going to click and release to place it down. I'm going to go ahead and rename this. So this is going to be 02 back. I'm going to end up cutting 2 pieces of my back skirt because I'm going to have a center back seam with a zipper. So I'm going to type 02 and again S for self. Okay. So now I have my front skirt and my back skirt. Let me turn these intermediate points off. Okay. So for your back skirt, the measurements are going to be slightly different. This is not on your handout. We reviewed this in class, but I'll say it here as well. So the back skirt, we're going to actually move the center back line out 1/2 inch to add a little bit more ease into our back. And we're going to raise our waistline up 1/8 inch. So first I'm going to go to Create, Offset, Even, and I'm going to choose my center back line. I want to be on Replace, and I'm going to right click OK. And I'm going to bunny click to get to my value mode, and I want to do positive 0.5. Okay. I'm going to right click OK. Then I'm going to go to Offset Uneven, and I'm going to slide into my center back waistline, and I'm going to do a positive 0.125 for 1/8 inch because I want it to go up and outside of the piece. And then I'm going to click and drag into my side seam line and choose 0. I already have curve added to this line, so I'm happy with the way it looks. I'm going to right click OK. Again, I was on Replace, so I don't have to swap my lines. If you forget to be on Replace, you would then have to go to Modify, Swap, and swap your internal line for your perimeter line. Now, because I'm asking you all to give me measurements, I want to make sure my hip line extends to this perimeter line. So I could use Modify, Adjust like we did for our A-line shape and move that out to the center back line. But I'm going to use Extend Line, and I'm going to choose this internal hip line, and I'm going to right click OK. And it's automatically going to snap it to the closest perimeter line. Okay. So now I have my front and my back pieces with their correct shapes and ease added back into the back piece. All right. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add my darts. So I'm going to go to Advanced, Dart, Add, and just simple add. We don't need to add with fullness because if you remember, we have 3/4 inch of fullness on both our front and our back pieces. That's going to go into our dart. So we're going to choose Add. Now to select the opening point, I want the opening point to be at the midpoint of my waistline on both pieces. So I'm going to right click and choose midpoint, just like we did when we made lines and points in our first class. And I'm going to choose the waistline here. The distance down, so it's asking me the length of the dart. So for the front, I want my dart to be 3.5 inches. So I'm going to choose 3.5. Then it's asking me for my dart width. My dart width is going to be 3/4 of an inch to take over this fullness that we had added in the waist before. So 0.75. Okay. Now I'm going to do that again on my back. Dart, advanced dart, add, right click, midpoint. Click and release the waistline. My back dart is going to be 4.5 inches long, and my width is going to be 0.75 again. And then right click OK. Right. Okay, so my pieces are almost ready to go. The last thing I need to do before I get them production ready is to rotate them. So right now the grain line is going across my pieces, which I don't want. I want the grain line to be going along the length of my skirt. So if you remember, the grain line defaults to going lengthwise across your screen like this, as if this was a fabric roll, this green screen. So I need to rotate my pieces, and then I'll need to realign my grain line. So first I'm going to go to Modify, Piece Actions, Rotate. I'm going to choose 90 degrees and clockwise. And I'm going to choose both pieces, select and release, and I'm going to right click OK. All right, so both of them rotated 90 degrees. This is great. I'm going to right click OK and right click OK to get out of the function. Now you see my grain line is going in the wrong direction. So if I were to save these pieces and then reopen them and bring them down, they would be rotated back. So the rotation doesn't set unless you realign your grain line. So to do that, you're going to go to Modify, Piece Actions, Realign. You want to make sure you have this selection, Realign Grain Grade Reference. And you're going to select the actual grain line, not the arrow. You're going to select the grain line, and you see it turns to be the correct orientation. Okay? And I'm going to right click OK to get out of that function. Now I have my front skirt and my back skirt. I want my side seams to be together. So I'm actually going to flip my front piece over. So I'm going to choose Modify, Piece Actions, Flip. Now you can flip about a line, so I could flip about the center back line, but I'm just going to use my quadrants to figure out how I want to flip. So the red arrows are your current piece. You see the arrow directions match the arrows on my grain line. So I want to flip it over the x-axis. So I'm going to choose this blue arrow selected here. And then I just click on my piece and I right click OK. And you see it flips. And now you see my grain line again is upside down. So this arrow needs to be pointing up. So I'm going to go back to Modify, Piece, Realign, Realign Grain, and I'm going to choose my grain line. And it flips in the right direction. Okay. Now we have our front and back pieces, and we're ready to add seam allowance and notches.